this first news story comes to us from VGC, written by Jordan Midler. 2 big Final Fantasy remakes are reportedly still in active development. According to a noted industry insider, Nate the Hate, who has a record of revealing information about video games ahead of their official reveal, both titles, which have been rumored for several years, are still on the way. Replying to a user on X who asked about the status of both games, Nate the Hate said both remain in active development. Final Fantasy IX Remake isn't expected to see release in 2025. Maybe we'll see it launch in 2026. Final Fantasy IX was originally released in 2000 for the PlayStation. It was directed by Hiroki Ito, who later directed Final Fantasy XII, and the game was re-released in 2010 as a PS1 classic for PS3, PSP, with Vita support arriving in 2012. Blah, blah, blah. It's more about Final Fantasy IX, but Final Fantasy Tactics is the other game Nate the Hate mentioned, was initially released in 1997 for PlayStation. The game was developed by Yasumi Matsuno, who would go on to develop Final Fantasy XII. And so that's kind of the state of things. Again, an industry insider seems to generally know things, saying they're still working on these games. I guess to throw it to you guys here, my question is, because Final Fantasy remakes being more a thing now with Final Fantasy VII, obviously, and possibly now 9 and Tactics coming. I guess I'm curious if you guys have played these games, the original games, and are these games you would pick for a remake, or are there other Final Fantasy games you feel like you would rather have coming? Mark, I'll throw to you.
Yeah, I have. I really love Final Fantasy IX. So I didn't play any of these games when they were first released, but during that like Xbox 360 era, I had a friend who had a PlayStation 2, and so I borrowed his PlayStation 2 and like played a bunch of these classic, PlayStation era RPGs, and Final Fantasy IX was one of them. And I really loved Final Fantasy IX. Tactics, I remember my cousin having and just not understanding Tactics at all. It's a game that I've still never like beaten and really put that much time into. But I think for me, my big question about both of these is when they say remake, like what form of a remake are we talking about? Because Final Fantasy, like the Final Fantasy VII project is so huge. It's like a reimagining of the game. Plus it's, over 3 titles. And is that what they're planning for Final Fantasy IX? Is that what they're planning for Tactics? Like Tactics to me seems like it could easily be a game, maybe, but 9 is similarly huge like 7. And so are they planning for that to be a trilogy? The trajectory of the 7 remakes makes me think that probably is not the best idea. But does that mean that these are like HD 2D games? I have so many questions about what this means for games of this scope. Like, what is a remake nowadays?
Yeah. Well, and you mentioned that like the trajectory of like the like sales response to the second Final Fantasy VII remake, Rebirth, is like, just thinking about the cultural impact that Final Fantasy VII has as like its own distinct brand, as separate from the rest of the Final Fantasy series, that like it is having a hard time sustaining a remake trilogy of games. And like 9 was a big game. It's a good game. I like it a lot, but like it had nowhere near the cultural impact of Final Fantasy VII, right? Like even before we start digging into remakes, Final Fantasy VII really is like a base game, 3 little sequel games, and a movie, right? Whereas Final Fantasy IX was just Final Fantasy IX. There was also a rumor or announcement from 5 years ago at this point that they were making a Final Fantasy IX anime that I don't think ever has aired to my knowledge. I don't know that it was ever released in Japan or anywhere else for that matter. Maybe it was. Maybe it was another one of those things where it came out and maybe didn't make the cultural impact they expected. So maybe they are planning to make it like a cross-media type experience. But I think you're right, Patrick. 9 just has a lot of people who love it, but definitely doesn't have the cultural cash of a Final Fantasy VII. Yeah. I would also just add that, and I don't think this, matters for, like the business side of things, but like the themes of Final Fantasy VII being about like the excesses of a greedy corporation, like overwhelming the natural world, fits so perfectly with the kind of like maximalism of the Final Fantasy VII remakes that like it feels like a perfect blend of like the bloat in Rebirth to me is like part of the artistic statement of the game and of like the story, and that's just not really part of 9. So like if they made 9 into a trilogy of remake action RPGs, I'd be like, I don't know that makes sense, but you could just really like a nice like redone everything version of 9, I think could be a killer title, right?
Yeah, like you're saying, if they don't try to like reimagine it, and it's just,
yes,
we are going to remake 9, maybe not in the HD 2D style, but similar to what they've done with Dragon Quest 3, just maybe in its own art style, in its own like engine that hews closer to what Final Fantasy 9 was. But you're also like, is there that much of a market for that, or are we in like Secret of, or like the Mana series where they have been remaking those and creating new ones, and they all just seem to have kind of a middling response. I don't know. It's really hard for me to imagine what this looks like. Yeah.
As a new Final Fantasy fan myself, because I had never really played one until Final Fantasy VII Remake. And then I was hooked. I got on the Rebirth, jumped on 16. Like I purchased 15, haven't played it yet still, but it's like one of those things where like, okay, I'm wanting to get into it more and more and more. And I'm interested in the more classic titles because I just hear about how incredible they are. 9 is one of them. I guess from, a wish for me, like what I hope it is, like I kind of hope it is a full blown remake. It doesn't have to be reimagining, like you're saying, like with Final Fantasy VII, what they're doing with that. But man, to see that like really completely expanded into like updated graphics and, combat style and all that stuff, like I would be a blast to play, as a, again, more modern Final Fantasy fan, like that would turn me on immediately to jump in there. And not that I'm against playing the classic, the original one, but it's definitely more enticing to be like, oh, okay, another game that's, similar, but, just not split into 3 parts. Like, honestly, having it just in one game would be nice, not having to wait, 6-7 years to play all 3 parts or whatever it's going to end up being at the end of 7. Does sound enticing.
Can I bring up something that may send a chill down Mark's spine? That if they remake Final Fantasy 9 now, they'll have to have voice actors for the characters of Vivi and Quina.
I know, but if they were going to do an anime, I guess they were planning to do it anyways.
That's a good point. Yeah,
but no, I do. I think it totally, because the model for these that you kind of want to see is like the Capcom Resident Evil remakes, right? Like all of those have been like so faithful, but also modernizations that make it so exciting for newcomers to play, where they're easy to recommend. It's easy to recommend. Like you should absolutely check out Resident Evil 2, and the remake is the like perfect way to do it.
Right.
With Final Fantasy 9, like I really liked Final Fantasy 9, but even when I was playing it in like 2009, I was like, oh, it sure would be nice if this had quality of life updates, if I didn't have to wait so long for the transitions between battles and all that kind of stuff. I really think for me, the question is one of like scope, like how do they do this in a way that is sustainable, which to me, like from a business perspective, to me feels like a single game. But the world of Final Fantasy 9, the game it spans like 3 discs or something on the PlayStation. Wow. 4 discs, like
4 discs.
It's a huge game. And so what does remaking that look like in a way that is not Final Fantasy 7? I don't know that much about Tactics. What about you, Patrick? Did you play the original Tactics?
Yeah, I never finished it, but this was a common rental for me as a kid. So yeah, I don't know. Like every time they make they made a new, like, you know, Tactics Advance is like, none of them are like the exact same game, but they're all like pretty similar. I do think that there's probably enough like between battle stuff to flesh out in Final Fantasy Tactics that like a remake of that could be like big and meaningful and successful. And also just like, if they were to release a new game in the Final Fantasy Tactics series right now, I feel like that would be a big pop too. So
especially with like a 2D HD art style, like people go nuts.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's tough though, because like, what's that? The name of the game? Triangle Strategy. Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
That like that's basically what that is. But Triangle Strategy was like so far up its own butt with its lore, and like the cutscenes between battles in that game were like an hour long each. I think I played through the first 3 missions in it. Hey, dig in, man. It's a beautiful game.
Sounds like a Hideo Kojima game. I'm all about that.
Kinda, yeah.
Oh man.
But yeah, I don't know. I sort of think that like a Tactics remake would be just as good as like a new Tactics game. And that a 9 remake would just be kind of a tough sell. Mark, you were mentioning like just quality of life improvements, and like the releases of 7, 8, and 9 as they exist right now on all modern platforms, you know, do have where you can like speed up battles, and you can, you know, have it go at like double, triple, quadruple speed. You can do EXP boosts and all the gold boosts, all this kind of stuff. Turn off random encounters, so that like the versions that exist right now are a lot easier to play than it was on the original PS1. So some of what you're asking for does exist already.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point. Although I found when I was playing the Chrono Cross Radical Dreamers edition, that even with those quality of life stuff, there still is like, I could see how it'd be difficult for somebody who's never played these games before to get into them with like the pre-rendered backgrounds and like, you know, the camera changes when you go from one location to another, and like trying to figure out like, oh, is this thing in the world something that I can interact with? Oh, it's not. It's just like a pre-rendered thing. But yeah, I mean, you're right. It's not impossible to get into, and that's a good point that the most recent releases do have a lot of ways for you to kind of cut through the annoying pieces of it. But I think you have a good point about Tactics. I think of Tactics as like a well-liked game, but I don't know that a remake of Tactics would really...
Right.
I don't know who that's for, to be completely honest. Like, why not just make a new Tactics game if you're going to do it?
Yeah. Which they, you know, to the earlier point, sort of did with Triangle Strategy.
Yeah. I don't know.
I feel like I ate that word, Triangle Strategy.
I guess I feel like Square Enix is just kind of baffling to me in a lot of the things that they've been doing recently. And the fact that both these games allegedly are still in development when at least 9 has been rumored since what, like 2021 or something like that.
Long time. Yeah.
Means that whatever, you know, Square Enix in the past few months has been talking so much about changing their development structure. And it seems like they're really trying to make structural changes. And it will be interesting. I don't know that we'll ever know, but I do wonder like how these games are or not affected in that change in strategy. Like maybe Tactics never sees the light of day. Maybe Final Fantasy 9 changes scope or something. We'll probably never know, but
yeah.
But part of the stated like realignment of priorities is doing fewer exclusive games, right? So you know, if they are going to do something with Final Fantasy 9 that is like a full-fledged remake, but maybe they just like keep the scale of it down so that it can run on PlayStation 4 and you know, Xbox One and Switch 2, that it can, you know, just be sold to a wider audience than, you know, the Remake and Rebirth, which, you know, were PlayStation 4 and 5 exclusives respectively. So,
or to that point, like even if they stick with Tactics, like maybe 9 doesn't see the light of day, but Tactics, it comes out and it's like a mobile game. Like I could almost see a mobile version of Tactics existing as well, and kind of being like on the go, like, oh, do a battle here and there kind of thing, do a mission. I don't know, like a a simplified version, which I don't know if that's what people are asking for. And I haven't played the original, but I know they had an iOS version of the original Tactics game, because my buddy played it to death, and he's like, "You got to get this. It's in the App Store. Go play Tactics," because he remember playing the original on PS1 or whatever, and
you can play it for $14 right now.
Yeah, exactly. So like, if they made just a more like maybe not a remake, but yeah, made a modern version, made a new version, put it out on iOS, and I could charge full price for the thing. I don't know, a full-fledged game. Like, yeah, if that's what they're looking for, is more multi-console games, like it'd be perfect on a Switch, it'd be perfect on a phone, on an iPad, on a whatever, and on console even if you want it. Like, maybe unfortunately that means 9 doesn't see the light of day, which I would hope not, but I don't know, you never know.
We'll see. It's not that we'll never know. We will know someday.
Yeah, we will know someday. It might be 40 years from now and the game still doesn't come out, then we'll know, okay, they canceled that one. They probably canceled it. Thank you so much for watching that clip from our podcast. Remember, if you want to watch the full episode, link will be in the description below. You can click on that and check it out. We got listener questions. We got more news segments. We got what you playing. We got a lot of fun things. So yeah, more than just the news. There's a lot more to the show that you should go check out. So remember, click that link in the description. Check out that full episode.